We've got people from all over the state in the chat. That's exciting. So numbers are starting to level off, so we can begin. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to offer this webinar, which will center on working with youth survivors. This is part two to last week's webinar, and today we'll focus on tech-facilitated abuse. We've got the same facilitators as last time from day one, and we're so excited to welcome them back. We're very excited to continue the conversation. And I'm Mia. I'm from the CUNY Institute for State and Local Governance. I'm going to pass the mic to our partner at the Office of Victim Services, Rachel, to give a warm welcome.
Thank you, Mia. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the OVS VAP Training Center webinar, Working with Youth Survivors, Part 2. My name is Rachel Gentili. I'm the Program Outreach Specialist in the Training and Outreach Unit at OVS. And our new director, B. Hansen, isn't able to make it today, but she does send her official welcome. And in the meantime, I'm just going to go over a little webinar housekeeping before I pass it back to Mia and then to our incredible presenters. Today's webinar is part of a series of webinars that's offered through the Training and Technical Assistance Request Program, or TARP. If you were on last week, you've definitely heard us speak about it, but Mia's going to talk a little bit more about this program in just a minute. It is led by our partners at the CUNY Institute for State and Local Governance, and in just a moment, I'll share a link so that you can go look at the catalog and sign up for free, totally free training for your colleagues and yourselves. For the last few years, we've hosted a series of webinars. They're designed to help you tackle some of the unique challenges that you or your programs may be facing, and today's no different. We hope that you get the most out of this training, and should you want to go back or revisit anything that's covered, we will be recording and publishing this to our YouTube channel within the coming week or so. Please stay tuned. Visit ovs.my.gov/training to see any of our upcoming events, and make sure you take the evaluation as we exit this webinar. With all of that being said, we'll put it all in the chat. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to pass it back to you, Mia, and then our friends at Day One. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel, for that welcoming start. So before we dive into today's webinar, I want to provide a very quick overview of the program that Rachel mentioned, TARP, and the program that makes this webinar today possible. So as I mentioned at the top of the call, we at the CUNY Institute for State and Local Governance help create and implement all of the offerings of this TARP program, including today's webinar. TARP provides webinars and individual training to victim assistance providers across New York State. So through this program, victim assistance providers are able to request individualized training and support based on their needs. And those trainings can focus on a whole variety of topics. Once VAPs request these trainings, either ISLG facilitates trainings for them, or we connect them to experts across a consortium of consultants who can meet your needs. All of these trainings, including today's webinars, are at no cost to the victim assistance provider. I've included here just a quick overview of the categories or some categories of trainings that we offer. We have conflict resolution and accountability. We have trauma-informed supervision. We've been doing a lot of vicarious trauma and burnout trainings. And again, all of this is at no cost to the victim assistance provider. To request this kind of individualized training is very easy. All you have to do is to go to our TARP catalog, which we'll put in the chat, select the category of training that you would like to receive, and then complete a form. The form's completely online. It's very simple. The one thing to keep in mind is that a program director or an executive director from your organization needs to be the one to complete this form. Once you do, we connect with you, we schedule a call, and we start getting those trainings scheduled and on the books. Of course, I'm biased, but we've received a lot of great feedback from these trainings. We have really great consultants similar to Day One and the folks we have here today to meet your needs. So we encourage you to submit requests. This program ends in September, so the sooner you can get those in, the sooner we can reach you. So now I'm really excited to get to the purpose of why we're all here, and that's to continue the conversation we started last week with day one. We have here Z Wilkerson, Nora Rexer, and Natalie Rentas. They're all from day one. Day one is a service provider here in New York City that works with youth survivors of domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and provides a whole variety of services from community education to legal advocacy, counseling, leadership development, and they're here to help continue that conversation. So with that, I'll pass it to day one, and thank you all for joining us.
Thank you for that beautiful, beautiful introduction. Hello, everyone. So if you were here and tuned in with us last week, then this is part two. And luckily for you, we also added some things from last week that we may not have touched on. So if you are here and kind of trying to figure out, well, what happened to last week's, guess what? We got a surprise for you. But like I said, I am Z. And my team members here are Natalie Rentis and Nora, and we will be working together just to take you throughout the day. So before we get into anything, let's just get into a little bit of community agreements. Make sure you take care of yourself. Do what you need to do, whatever that looks like. This training is not going to be as heavy as the next one, but things may come up for you. So feel free to do what you need, get water, lay on the floor, whatever that looks like. We encourage you to share because the best way for us to continue to facilitate is for us to know like what your thoughts are, what your feelings and your reactions are, and also for folks to just be able to interact with each other. So although you can't unmute, you can definitely use the chat. Be kind, but be honest, right? We always want to make sure like we are being kind to one another, but honest about your experiences, your feelings, your thoughts, your reactions. Let the story stay and the lessons leave, right? If folks want to tell a story, we want you to do that. Just make sure you share the lesson, not the story that someone else shared. And I promise you, we're going to have a good time, so you don't even have to worry about that. So just a couple of more logistics. So day one, we operate in many different ways through community education, which is what you have here. We have a legal team, which Nora oversees, social services, which is Natalie, and a larger team member, and then RAP and ERAP coordinators that work inside of schools, meeting young people on the day-to-day. If you have any questions about any of the work that we do, or you want to be connected to any of our services, please feel free to take our contact info at the end. So here goes the fun part. I told y'all we were gonna have a good time. I want you to take a moment to look at the picture. I know some folks have already dropped hellos and highs in the chat, but please feel free to do that if you haven't. Let us know how you're feeling today. And then I want you to drop a 1, a 2, or a 3 based off of how comfortable you are using technology. So I am definitely a 3 right now, but I feel like it's slowly declining because, I'm getting a little older and, but I'm definitely a 3 for now. Natalie, what about you?
I'm feeling like sometimes I'm a 1. Like just doing this PowerPoint was really humbling. But I feel like I can relate to all 3. But I'm right in the middle. I think 2 is more so where I'm at.
Same.
What about you? 2.
2.3.
That's fair. What's the chat saying? What we saying in the chat? How we feeling?
We're getting everything. All sorts of numbers. Wait, actually, I'm trying to look if we have any ones. We have a 1. We have a 1.
Okay.
And I sympathize with that 1.
Absolutely. Well, don't worry. We hope to make you a little bit more comfortable by the end, just a little bit. So don't have the expectation too high when it comes to technology and us in the end. So today we're going to talk about our relationship with technology post-pandemic. And also looking at it from our young people's perspective. We're going to examine how technology can be used as a tool of abuse, but also as a means for safety. And then we're going to reflect on how we can support our young people as they navigate a technological world, because for many of our young people, they don't remember life before tech, right? Like they're like, what do you mean you used to send a message? Like what, a letter? What is that? So we're really going to talk about that more today and how we can be supportive for our young folks. If you remember AIM days, this is for you. All right, so let's use the chat, folks. What are some ways you used to connect to your partner back in the day? So think back to, you know, the 1900s. How did you connect to your folks back in the day?
Beeper.
Beeper, see, beeper.
I had a
The
red
home
beeper. I'll
phone.
never forget it.
AIM, landline, text. AIM, a lot of AIM. Telephone, walkie-talkie, MySpace, mail, home phone, a beeper,
Kick,
passing
Facebook.
notes,
What about the
messenger.
bleep? Remember the bleep? The what was that?
Mhm,
BlackBerry or something? Those phones.
the Nokia, oh, MySpace. All right, cool. So we got a mix. I think we're all kind of almost like in the same era. I'm feeling Skonex, if y'all remember those days.
Uh-huh.
Oh, if you remember those days. All right, let's go a step further. What are some ways young people are communicating with each other now?
Snapchat,
Snapchat.
Discord,
Use
smartphone, social
Discord.
media, iMessage, FaceTime, Instagram, TikTok.
TikTok. Yep.
A lot of text. I'm seeing Discord. I love that
Mhm.
folks are highlighting Discord. That is
Yep.
dope.
That's such a
That,
big one now.
yeah, that means that you are definitely a level 3 tech person if you know. If you know, you know. Be real. Look, come on, y'all. Y'all are thriving. All right. So we know that young people are definitely using technology way more than ever before. And these statistics, they just talk to that, right? And they talk about the decline from certain things and the upheaval of others, right? So, like for example, when this data was first taken back in 14 or 15, right? Facebook was it. It was popping, right? And if you were there, I know I was there. Facebook was the thing, right? It was like college savvy, so you thought you was cute if you was a little too young for college, right? It was a good time, right? But we see that now, as of 2022, 2023, right? Facebook has now declined, right? And I see folks talking about Discord, right? I see folks talking about TikTok, right? Snapchat, right? YouTube, right? All these things, Be Real, Twitch, right? Things that are starting to be on the up and up, right? Things that we know our young people are constantly talking about, right? And I just want to make a quick tidbit. Someone last week, or someone's last week, asked about where we got the data from last week's presentation. This is the same data. So this came from the Pew Research Center, same exact data. You can find all this information on their website, including the stuff that we shared last week. So that answers that question. But as you see this, and we're reflecting on you know, TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram coming up. What are some things that's coming up for you? What are some thoughts, feelings, or reactions you might be having to the data that you see on the screen?
Overwhelming.
Yeah, I just so just to answer the question, would love to know what are some thoughts, feelings, or reactions that you have just from seeing the data on the screen.
And it looks like two
Uh,
people asked what Discord is.
yeah.
You want to share it, Nat?
I have a very limited understanding of Discord. I want to say it's related to gaming, but they use chat rooms essentially to talk to people. And so we've seen young people engage with Discord, and there has been some violent messaging through those platforms. So I feel like each chat room is probably related to a different game or a different set of point of interest. But it reminds me of the chat rooms that we had, well, we had when we used AIM. It feels very similar. I don't know if that's correct because I don't be in my baby's girl that much, but I see
No,
what's happening.
that's spot on, right? Like they're finding any way that they can talk to one another, right? And Discord is just one of many tools that young people are using currently to talk. I see someone said in the chat, right? They can use YouTube to chat. Yeah, on comments, right? They're commenting on things. Cyberbullying happens on YouTube all the time, right? Young people are posting shorts or videos and people are commenting. So when you think about it in that way, right, just to make it a little more real, anywhere that someone can contact someone and
Mhm.
talk to them is a form of technology if it's not face to face or in person, right?
And
And
even
I'm
through
also
the
seeing,
games, I'm
yeah,
sorry, I was just gonna add, even through the games, like I didn't even realize they can talk to each other through the game. So they're playing Fortnite and having conversations with complete strangers. It's
online,
really,
yep.
really a lot.
Even Roblox, right? Things that like our younger people, even though we're talking about 13-year-olds, right? Our 10 and 11-year-olds, right? They're definitely on Roblox and they are having a good time and playing. IMVU. There's so many other things out there. These just talk about what the highest ones were, right? But we know that
Mhm.
there's so many out there. And I see a lot of folks are saying scary in the chat, right? And that can be scary, right? It can be scary to not be up to date with what your young person is doing or what the young people that you're working with are doing, but it also can be empowering, right? And we're going to talk a lot about empowerment because tech is not going anywhere. We kind of have to move with the times, but also teach our young people to be able to have healthy relationships with technology. Loving the conversation. So just to add a little bit more context to this, right? 92% of young people go online daily, right? That's every day, Monday through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, right? 81% of LGBTQ youth search for health and medical information online versus 46 of other, right? So that's everybody else. And that's actually a positive, right? It means that they are out there and they're looking to find information that is geared specifically for them, right? But hopefully by people, for them, by them, right? More than 1 in 10 LGBTQ youth first disclose their identity to someone online. Platforms for connecting with people in other countries for free, right? Students are meeting, doing homework, finding jobs, and dating through tech. And technology supports community building, organizing, and it unifies, connects, and provides access to information and education, right? So on the screen, as you can see, there's many different things that are happening, right? It's the good, the bad, and the ugly, so to speak, right? And during COVID, it was a means to an end for most young people, right? Most young people didn't have a way to communicate with their friends on a daily, right? So they were able to connect through TikTok, through text messaging, through Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, right? And then they were also able to connect with their teachers, right? And other well-meaning adults like the folks that are on here, right? I'm sure for most of you, you may have connected with someone you work with via some platform, right? It was a way to check in to make sure that they were safe, right? And it was also a way to check in to make sure that great things were still happening, that they were still doing homework, right? And we also know that there were other things that were happening as well, right? And we're going to talk somewhat about those two in a moment. And Matthew, I love that. I still do. I love that. That's right. Don't push away the tech. The tech is here for us. It works if you're working. So let's talk a little bit more about what some of the benefits of technology are. And I want you to think long and hard. Drop in the chat. What are some of the benefits? And you can't say what I just named either.
We have none so far.
We have
Accessibility information. No, there are a lot. I'm joking. Speaking to loved ones, sharing information, keeping up with society, access to information.
I see I'm going to grad school
Convenience.
completely online.
Completely
So
online, yeah.
mhm.
Community building.
Convenience, definitely. Disability
Disability
friendly.
friendly. Yeah.
Yeah. Maps, right. Staying connected to friends and family, raising money.
Fundraising, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. So just to continue to add some truth to all the things that folks are saying in the chat, which I love. Sorry, I can't see. There we go. They are platforms with connected to people around the world, right? And I know on my Instagram. I love to watch what other people are cooking in other places. It is my thing. I love to find a good recipe. So I am definitely one of those. Students are meeting, doing homework, and finding jobs, right? So those that are like, you need a job, they are finding them online, honey.
Mm-hmm.
Technology supports community building, organizing, right? And we talked about this, right? And definitely so true. Now there are so many campaigns that support young people and just like movements, especially a lot of grassroots movements are happening online. And then young people are helping to stay connected with one another and create safe spaces, right? So although we're talking about the bullying and the negativity that happens, right? They really are creating safe spaces where young survivors can connect to their friends, can connect to other safe people, especially in spaces where they may not feel safe. So just to add a little bit more research, because we love research, it's so fun. Um, Teens report we want to break cycles, right? And so what you're looking at here is you're looking at how many young people they the Pew Project. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, y'all. When they did this research, they wanted to know how many young people are experiencing some form of abuse, right? Whether it is cyberbullying, right? Rumors, like threats, what's happening out there. And these are some of the things that they notice when they're talking about breaking cycles, right? Teens report that dating abuse via tech is a serious problem, right? They're highlighting it. They're saying it out loud, like this is a really bad thing. It is something that's happening, right? Cell phone calls and texting, right, at unimaginable frequency means constant control day and night, right? And this is something that I'm always very transparent with my daughter who's 11 about, right? Just that, like, it is not okay for people to continue to call your phone, nor is it okay for you to continue to call people's phone. If someone says they don't want to talk, you just stop talking to them, right? Let them relax, calm down, whatever, and then you can talk to them later or not, right? Like that is their autonomy and that's their truth. Um, Parents do not know about teen dating constant contact, right? So parents, right? If you're a parent like I am, right, you only know what you know, right? And you're trying your best to keep up with what the new thing is. And it's always something new, right? Today is Snapchat, tomorrow it'll be something else, right? And for some of us, we know our kids are dating, for others, we don't, right? But what we don't know is what level of constant contact they're having with their partner, right? Is it they're talking to school and then they're going home and that's it? Or is it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, nonstop, right? Because what we know is it's unhealthy for anyone to talk to anyone all day long and all night long, right? Cell phones and internet have become weapons of tech dating abuse. We know that. Parents do not know about this abuse, right? So a lot of parents, especially if there's a gap, and when we say parents, they definitely mean caregivers, right, of all ages, acknowledging that for some young folks, right, they may be being raised by their grandparent, right, or their auntie who may be older, right, than maybe a young millennial parent, right? And so keeping those things in mind as well as we continue to go through, as we continue to work with our young people and also go through this PowerPoint, right? Parents believe technology makes dating abuse more prevalent and more hidden, yet few are doing anything about it. And I'm going to stop right here for a moment before I even read the last one, because I would love to know what your thoughts, your feelings, and reactions are around this bullet point. Parents believe technology makes dating abuse more prevalent and more hidden, yet few are doing anything about it. Why do you think that is?
They don't know what to do. Someone shared
Mm-hmm.
or how to do it. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
How to start a conversation about it. Or there may be the child or young person might be secretive about the abuse.
I see they're trying to find privacy and boundaries with their children. Absolutely. Fear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fear,
Embarrassment.
embarrassment. Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of feelings, right, around why parents do it, right? And I think that there's truth to everything that's being said in the chat as you all continue to drop things in, right? Definitely wanted to create spaces of trust with our young people, right? And being mindful that like we want them to come to us when we think that things are a little weird, right? Or they're not necessarily sure how to feel about something, right? Sometimes I think fear is really, really an honest answer, right? Because for some parents, right, they may be experiencing their own forms of domestic violence and domestic abuse, right? And so they may not even know how to help their young person if they are experiencing or living through it, right? So yeah, so I wanted to highlight that because I want us to be mindful of the fact that there are so many different reasons, right? And I didn't even see but language barriers, right? Thinking about a language barrier between like multiple things, right? The actual language that someone speaks, right? And also slang, right? Like the way kids use ebonics and slang, right? Sometimes I'm like, what does that mean, right? Like I'm like, can you make it make sense for me? Because what I may think to be harmless might not be something harmless, but I'm hearing it all the time and I don't know how to inquire or ask, right? So thinking about that as well as we think about like just language and how our young people speak versus how we speak. And then this last bullet point says parents also do not know that their teens are victims of physical and sexual abuse, right? And that goes back to they don't know what they don't know, right? And trying to create a space that's safe for our young person, right? And also giving them opportunities to have trust and build trust with us, right? But us not necessarily knowing to what extent something is happening, right? And so it's super important for us to ask our young people questions, to really just like check in on them. How was your day? Right? What's going on in your world? What does that mean? Right? Look at
Right.
those TikTok videos, right? Look at that Instagram video, right? Because not in a weird way that like is invasive, but in a way that shows interest in what they're doing so that
Right.
they know that there's eyes on them and so that they know that someone loves them, right? Because when you show interest in your young people, they're less likely to hide things from you because they know, okay, this person is going to check in on me. They're going to make sure that I'm okay. They're going to make sure that I'm good and definitely having open-ended conversations. Love that. Thank you, Taylor. Is there anything else on this page that stands out before I go into the next thing? Okay. So then we just want to think about the spectrum of abuse, and I'm not going to read through all of these things, but I would love for folks to either highlight some things that might stand out or any questions that you might have in relationship to things. I'm going to take a sip of water. So give me 1 second. It's also important to note that if you don't have questions, that's okay. But knowing that some of these things are things that if you were here last week, we definitely highlighted, right? Like breaking a partner's phone, right? That is definitely a big one, right? Throwing their phone against the wall, right? Eavesdropping, right? On phone calls, right? I see what is.
See what is doxing? Yeah.
Do you want to take it?
Yeah, I think this is actually one that might be a little more familiar to people, even though you maybe don't know what the name is, which is basically just publishing personal information about someone. And obviously this is not just something that happens with youth, but it's pretty common.
Mhm.
You know, like address, phone number, and usually with some sort of like bad intent.
So anytime you put out somebody's information, right, that you should not be putting out, right, that is doxing. Anytime you leak information that should not be. Any other things stand out? I want to highlight forcing a partner to share their location. Sharing a location is a really, really big thing now. I know friends do it all the time, right? But when it becomes, to know when it becomes abuse is when you share your location and you leave from your house and you go to the store and the person is like, well, where are you going? Right? You said you were going to be home and now it shows that your location went from point A to point B, where are you, right? Or if someone says, well, I'm going straight home, but instead they decide that they're stopping at the store, right? That's where it starts to become abuse, right? It's one thing to be like, I'm sharing my location with you because I'm going to a area I've never been to before, right? And God forbid something happened to me. I just want someone to know where I am versus constant all day, every day, right? And then that person is tracking your location. And that's a really, really big thing now, especially with teenagers, because they feel like, oh, well, my partner wants to keep me safe, right? But it's a matter of what's control versus what isn't, right? And really looking and thinking about control, right? Because following someone's location literally to a T, that's a form of control. It's not a safety thing. It's you're trying to control them.
Mm-hmm.
See, can I also highlight from the chat, which I agree with, that password sharing has become very normalized.
Yes, absolutely. Fake images, absolutely. If you love me, you will share your password. Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Right. And your password is yours for a reason. Right. And it's important to teach young people, whether it's your kids or the ones that you work with, right, that all of those things that are being said in the chat are very true, but also the other end of it, right? Being able to say, like, you should not create fake images or AI images of other people, right? You should not leak sex that someone sends you to other people, right? Now, granted, we can have a whole conversation about like how they shouldn't be sexting anyways, but what we can't do is control what young people are going to do, right? We can give them the language and let them know all the health and safety risks behind it, but young people they're going to sex, they're going to have sex, right? They're going to be on the internet. Those are things that we can't control, but what we can do is give them the language to help both, right, both sides, right, understand what can happen if, right, and why you should think before you do, because we've seen it happen more than once, especially working in schools. I've seen it happen all the time where pictures get leaked and it's like, well, I thought that it was between us. And it's like, yeah, but at 14, people don't necessarily understand confidentiality and boundaries the way they should, because even at 35, there are folks that don't understand confidentiality and boundaries. So keeping those things in mind when you're talking to your young people, just about sexting and all the things that are up here, and also being able to just be mindful and let them know that like there are people out there that want to support them and care about them. And if it does happen, it's not the end of the world. We can support you. We can get those images taken down. Like there are things that they can do so that they understand that. And we're definitely going to talk about that in a short couple of minutes. So let's play a trivia game. So I have a couple of questions here, and let's see how folks are feeling. Let's see if they get the answers correct. All right. So what percentage of 14 to 24-year-olds experience some form of digitally abusive behavior? I see a lot of A's and B's.
Mhm.
A lot of A's and B's. Right, let's see. B, 40%. So those that said 40%, you get a gold star. Ding, ding, ding. All right, let's see the next one. What percentage, what percentage have had their partner use social media to track their whereabouts? All right, I'm seeing a lot of C's and A's. Oh,
There's a few D's in there.
I see a couple of D's. All right, we got a mixed bunch. No one is thinking B. No one's thinking B. Let's see. D. So, okay, so the few folks that said D, shout out to y'all. All right. Blank percent have had their partner read their text without their consent. What do we think? All right, I see a lot of C's and A's. A lot of C's and A's. Okay, I see a B. All right, let's see. Those that said A, 21%, right? Let's see. I think the numbers are lower because they don't realize what's abusive or unhealthy and what isn't. Once they know, they may report though. Absolutely, right? And I love that you highlighted that, right? Because data is always skewed, right? Think about the number of young people who don't know, right? You're absolutely 150% correct. And I'm sure that this number probably is even higher, right? If you survey more young people, you're going to find it to be even higher, right? Absolutely. Love that you highlighted that. Thank you.
And that folks highlighted that people are not just generally not reporting at all, you know, so
Absolutely.
very valid.
So now I'm going to slide this over to my team to let them continue you all through the process.
Thank you so much, Z. So this is my favorite thing to talk about, safety planning and really just thinking about safety throughout from the first point of contact throughout the life of our work with young people, keeping safety at the center of that. For this conversation, we're going to talk a little bit about safety planning that we weren't able to get to last week. But before I dive in, I'm curious to hear from folks, what does safety planning mean to you? On your options?
How to help folks out of trouble when they get into trouble.
Being prepared, yep. All right, so, oh, here we go to some more. Comfortable to exist in whatever my goal is. Options and plans, yep. Increase options, choices, yep. I love that you use choices, yep. Perfect, thank you. So we can go to the next slide. All right, a lot of y'all said some of these things. So a safety plan is literally a practical way for a survivor to lower or decrease their risk of being harmed by an abusive partner. So when we think about a safety plan, we're considering things that are specific to the young person's case. We're supporting them in thinking through adjustments or changes, and what someone mentioned, again, that point of choice. And our role is essentially to emphasize this young person's agency and their own choices. I think with a safety plan, we don't want to blur the lines of trying to control the behavior of someone else, because we actually can't do that. So really thinking about the changes that they themselves can make, something that they're comfortable doing, and sort of exploring what some of that could look like for them. And it articulates essentially ways for them to access support and help. It could include legal assistance, or it could include resources within their communities. And what's key in a safety plan is that it has to be realistic, especially for these young person. So a lot of times we have ideas of what a safety plan should look like for them, but we really want to make sure that we're connecting to what's realistic for their circumstances. Exactly. Choices are options to keep people alive. Thank you so much. Next slide. So things that we're going to consider when we're crafting a safety plan with young people is we're thinking about the full spectrum of their safety, right? So their emotional, physical, technological safety, which throughout this conversation, we're going to dig a little bit deeper into the tech safety, but essentially mapping out some of these things. And someone in the chat mentioned, like, if they get themselves into trouble, ways to work through that. And that's exactly right too, right? So a safety plan can be used for an array of things. When we're talking specifically to survivors and victims of violence, we're going to think specifically their circumstances as it relates to the person who may have caused them harm. But when we're thinking about safety planning, we're also thinking about potential for harm to self, which we're not going to get into today. But really, some of the tools that we're going to talk about and things that we consider specifically for victims and survivors of dating violence can be applicable to other types of safety plans that we're putting together with young people. And then for social workers, super important to think about debriefing cases, talking through situations. And supervision is so important. Really, all minds, great minds, multiple minds, we all have different ideas, we all have thoughts, and we all have different creativity as it relates to what unique ideas we can think of for certain circumstances. And so seeking out support is also key to really thinking about building out a comprehensive safety plans with our young people. We can. So when we're initiating the safety conversation, a lot of times, well, in our practice, the conversation about safety starts at the first point of contact, even before we've met with young people. For some of you, you meet folks on a walk-in basis. For us, sometimes we get referrals and we're able to have an initial conversation with young people. And one of the first things we talk to our staff about is really assessing their safety. And I'm starting really at that first point of contact. A lot of times is, how have you been keeping yourself safe? And if I'm not able to connect with you immediately, maybe we're scheduling an appointment for 2 days from now, a week from now, how are you going to continue to keep yourself safe within that time, right? And thinking about ways that we can potentially inform how they're thinking about safety, even before we really get into the weeds of everything that they're sort of navigating. When we do finally meet with the young person and have time to dig into some of their experiences, we want to thoroughly assess the state of their safety and what their concerns are. Because we might have some of our own just on what they share, but we really want to consider what's standing out to them. We want to understand the patterns and the risks. And when I think about patterns too, we'll talk a little bit more about, I think someone may have mentioned changing routines or whatever the case is, but patterns for these young people as well, when we're thinking about school-age young people, like what is happening throughout their day when the person who caused them harm goes to school with them, right? What are some ways that we can support them in thinking about their safety when it feels almost impossible if I'm in the same class with someone or if I'm on the same floor with someone consistently? And so for some of the young people we've worked with, I've seen things like a young person using one specific stairwell to get around the school building. I've seen, some collaboration with school staff, but a lot of times these things require some advocacy. So really thinking about the ways that us as service providers can support in advocating for our young people, and also just sometimes we have to name these patterns because for them they don't feel like patterns, but really thinking about some of these things. And where I started was, how have you been keeping yourself safe? So that point of honoring their expertise and identifying what's already working is so powerful because it's validating to them and it affirms that, you got this, right? You're figuring this out. And a lot of times they have had to keep themselves safe in order to come to us. And that's huge, right? And so I want to remind them of that because I want them to continue thinking like, your situation is not impossible. Like you are already doing so much. And my role essentially is going to be what our next point is, to identify and inform those gaps in the best way possible, but also in collaboration with these young people. So we consider environment, consider support systems. One of the things that I think about as it relates to environment, I'm thinking about, again, going back to their commutes and their routes, their routines. I'm also thinking about what are safe spaces in their communities or in their areas that they frequent when they feel safe, right? Because then the moments where they're not feeling super safe, those places are going to be crucial. So that could be their nail tech, wherever they get their nails done. That could be the salon, that could be their local bodega or supermarket, right? Like it really depends their relationship within their communities, but we really want to think like on a regular day-to-day, what are some places that you interact with where you do feel a sense of community and connectedness, and if there were ever an emergency, you'd be able to access this location? I feel like with safety plans, we do want to try to identify, support people, but oftentimes when people are at risk of safety, they're alone. And so really thinking about what they have access to and what they can navigate when they're in spaces when they're by themselves, essentially. And again, connected to today, remaining attuned to the trends faced by them. Technology is constantly changing, and safety plans are also going to constantly change. They're evolving with, folks' circumstances, changes in their circumstances. They go to a new job, but the abuse continues. They transfer schools, but there's, some piece of that we're still wanting to navigate. We're still wanting to think about. And again, I mentioned in the last post, a comprehensive safety plan is going to touch on all areas of their safety. And I think that it's so important to remember that there's no like one size fits all in a safety plan. I feel like sometimes advocates get kind of, we go into autopilot and we're like, when I think about safety, I'm going to tell people, don't do this, don't do this, share your location only with people you trust, or X, Y, and Z. The reality is that if you're saying the same thing to everyone you're meeting, you're missing something, because everyone's circumstances that relates to their safety is going to be very different. And so we're going to continue. And what we can do as well, last week we talked a little bit about warning signs. So it's so important, connect back to that conversation, right? Some of the warning signs that we may have seen from what the client was sharing, maybe that's not coming out when the client is talking about their safety and what their safety means to them. And it's okay to connect back to a point to say, I heard you say in our conversation earlier that this thing was happening. Talk to me about how you've navigated that up until this point, right? And so really, it's all a matter of connecting, showing them that it's their choice, like someone is emphasizing exactly their choice and their options. And really my role is just to make that even bigger, right? Make it even as I want to say bulletproof, but I hate to use that word, but essentially really trying to think of pulling off the stops. And something that I was thinking about in one of our last slides, we mentioned the pandemic, and something that I never thought young people would experience was while they were doing their virtual learning, we had a case of a young person whose person who caused them harm shared a class with them and essentially would pin their video in the class and send screenshots and ask them what they were doing, if they were looking down, who are they talking to, or where if the background looked different. And I'm thinking some folks are still going to school virtually, and I'm not sure if the platforms are looking the same. But even that, right? Like, we're needing to think, is there opportunity if you're required to keep your camera on and you have this person literally send you screenshots of yourself? What kind of advocacy can they do for themselves? And where, as a service provider, do we step in? And I feel like in that case, we did have to do some advocacy. We wrote an advocacy letter just to explain what was happening to support this young person, because also it can be so vulnerable and so embarrassing to say, hey, this thing is happening to me, especially to their teachers, the professionals that they're interacting with. And so we might not see things quite this way now since folks are back in school and so on, but it's so much to think about as it relates to technology and young people's safety. So let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so now the reason why we're here. And before I jump into the tech safety, are there any questions about the points I brought up already? And I'm so happy that you folks are also bringing up control, because the thing we know about experiencing trauma is that what young people lose in those experiences essentially is that the point of control and choice, right, over what's happening and what they're experiencing. And so really just being a collaborative and a supporting source for them is going to make all the difference. Okay, so tech safety planning now. First, I'm going to say that I recognize that talking about technology, we can feel the anxiety and overwhelming feelings that these young people are experiencing it. And we're experiencing it too, because it feels so big and it feels so complex. And it feels like, wow, do I even know what I'm doing, right? And so these are some like tips that we can consider, things to think about when you're doing safety planning that's related specifically to young people's use of technology. And we talked a little bit about privacy settings, well, passwords essentially. And someone's point is that sharing passwords is really how they're establishing trust with each other. And folks, you're doing the right thing by sort of just exploring this concept of trust and sort of like asking them, right? If their partners are saying that, I need your password in order to trust you, I'm curious about them for themselves, with how that feels for them, but also how do they feel trust for other people? And can they offer that in their relationships and in those conversations? So we're considering things about privacy settings, security settings, these enhanced passwords. These are hard, even for me, because then we have to remember what they are, and we get that, right? So we want to think about alternative options. Yeah, and again, if you have nothing to hide, what's the problem? And really, it takes so much education, right? Like for us to educate young people and really make them understand what trust really looks like, and challenging some of those thoughts, right? Because if why does it mean I'm hiding something essentially? Like what have I hidden up until this point essentially to inform that thought or that assumption, right? It's really hard, complicated conversations to have, but it's really about what someone else brought up too, these open-ended questions, and really just sort of um, supportive challenging, right? To really have them thinking more about some of these things. So they can use incognito web browsing, being conscious of the physical access to their phone, like what that means, what that looks like, how they're keeping it protected. This one is not specifically related to tech abuse, essentially, but asking if they Google themselves is huge, even for us, to really identify how much information is on the internet about us. I think for younger people, we might not see as much, but definitely is something to consider. I'm going to pause and look at the chat really quickly. Okay. Talking about the consequences to someone having their passwords. I love that. Right to privacy is so important. Right, exactly. And it also ties into the conversation about boundaries, right? The conversation about consent and boundaries, all of these things really tie into all of this. And so we're also thinking about if they've received random emails, right? If there might be spoofing involved, have things been deleted that you didn't delete on your phone? Are there things that's weird? Is your phone doing things that you're not sure how they're happening? They can discuss the situations with their friends. I think, young people find community in their friendships and their relationships with their peers. And so having, someone just sort of aware of what's going on, or that can be helpful. And we want to know if the person who may have caused them harm knows their passwords, their security questions. We can talk about legal and non-legal paths. Somebody talked about pros and cons, and this is like the other end of like, if you go this route, this is what that looks like, and this is how it can go, because that too doesn't always look the same, right? And then the non-legal options. One of the things that I want to highlight on this slide too is considering how cutting ties or taking action may cause the abuse to escalate. And I think for me, what comes up with this one is directly related to that sharing location. But a lot of times where there are any connections through technology, the person will be notified if that ends, right? I mean, if they're tracking the location, they'll see that they can't access it, but a lot of ways they are notified. And this can essentially cause the violence to escalate. And so we want to have a plan to address that potential risk to their safety. And also, like, if they were tracking their location, how long was that happening? Because what I want to assess is how likely this person is to be fully aware of the young person's routines, right? If they were following it for a few days, maybe we can, do some things different. We might distract and they might not show up at a places you are. But if this was going on for the extent of their full relationship, they're probably fully ingrained in this understanding of what they're doing. And that requires a little bit of more creativity and more thoughtfulness around how we're going to address any potential risks that are going to come up if we technically break up, if you will. Consider signs of spyware. I think that one of the things I learned about spyware is that they do require, more often than not, they require a physical proximity or like physical access to the device. And so for this might not come up as much for some of our younger people, but definitely is something to consider. And you just essentially plan for their safety physically, technically, and basically just surrounding everything that they're engaging. And I'm just going to also pause one more time to look at the chat again. Googling themselves is a good one. Thank you. So much information online, and that's the truth. And that even applies to us. We did that. We had an activity at day one once where we really just like Googled ourselves and talked about the risks. We had someone support us in identifying ways to ask that our information be removed from the internet. And so it's really important just all around for folks to be considering these things. Conversations about technology being a tool can also be helpful. Yeah, how you can maximize this tool for your benefit and why privacy is so important. Exactly. Open credit cards using their access to their password. Yeah, they can do a lot. It really can be detrimental, especially, we're thinking about the financial abuse. And we talked about it a little bit last time, but what we're seeing now with these apps is the person-to-person payments, right? Like like it's been an increase in folks cash apping themselves, selling themselves money. Like we had a client whose account was depleted completely because the other person just sent themselves all their money. So it's like things that we haven't had to consider, we're really wanting to think a lot about. Will there be access to the recording later? I believe there will be, and I remember folks mentioning that it's going to be uploaded to the YouTube channel. Yeah, thank you, Z. So any questions about some of this? I know it's a lot, but any questions before we move on? I'm sure we can share the link to the YouTube channel for sure, the YouTube page. I think there was one more thing I wanted to add was we're thinking about, now that I'm thinking about the Venmo and the person-to-person payment interruptions, I know on Venmo, their activity can be public. I think that is also important to have folks thinking about and addressing their privacy settings, even with apps like that, because they're likely not going to be thinking about that, but it can be a cause for violence. Or if they break up and the person sees that on Venmo they sent someone money for something, it's just really thinking about all of the little ways that folks can have access that young people are likely not even thinking about. Okay, we can go there. Yeah.
We have a question, which is how do we include parents and caregivers in these conversations?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like it depends on how you interact with parents in your work. Like, so essentially, we don't work with the parents of the survivors necessarily, but our education team, our educators are holding workshops for parents. So to also educate them on things to look for. And so it could be something like if you're working on a tech tip sheet, like things to consider when you're thinking about your child's safety or your child's technology safety. I think that it gets tricky because young people don't really want their parents involved in their tech, right? And so really we're wanting to have parents thinking about what are some of the potential shifts in behaviors or patterns that they might be able to see. Like Z mentioned a few slides earlier, the nonstop communication, right? Maybe we're thinking of having parents think a little bit more about what are you acknowledging? What can you see about this engagement? What are ways that you can connect with your young people about technology? And honestly, just a conversation. I think kids love when you remind them that they're the experts of these things, right? So as a parent and caregiver, if you're like, can you just help me understand? Right? I think even as telling a parent, hey, ask them how they're using it, how to do these things, it really will open up the conversation for them to really understand how their young people are engaging with it. But any opportunities for parents to just learn, have some access to workshops, access to educational material, like again, tip sheets, or it depends on your setting, but however you connect with parents, you might want to try to offer them some quick tips about how they can be thinking about their children's tech safety. And do we have something in the Q&A? Yeah, so this question, it came up last time and Nora's gonna be answering that. So we'll get back to you on that one shortly. I have a few more slides. We can go to the next one. So decreasing risk and increasing safety. So some of these things we've already talked about. So really just putting this here as reminders, right? For the privacy component, these complex passwords, enhanced privacy and security settings, thinking about privacy and security in all of your apps, right? Some of them feel super obvious, like I'm not going to share my location if I post a story, or I'll post my location an hour or two later after I've left the place. Some of those feel pretty easy and young people are coming up with on their own, but they're not really thinking about Venmo activities. They're not really thinking about some of these other things. And then unlinking accounts and devices. And before we advise or before we say, hey, you should remove this person as a follower or you should block their number, we want to really think about what information we're maybe accessing. For instance, we had a young person who was experiencing a lot of tech abuse. The person was harassing them via text, but also what the person was doing was informing the survivor about their thought process, what things that they were thinking about doing, ways that they were stalking them. And what that also did was inform the legal case, right? So now our legal team is like, all of these things are happening, and these are the ways that we're supporting this young person in addressing it in their court case. They might not always have a court case, but you want to think about before we disconnect, before we completely lose our access to understanding what the person who is causing harm, what they're thinking and what their patterns are, how might I need to use this information later? And how can I mediate your safety in this moment while we sort of keep that open if we need to, right? Change location settings, fake answers to security questions, but making sure you have a plan for how to keep track of them. Deleting mutual accounts, potentially sometimes removing a follower is going to be so helpful. But also young people, it hurts them to lose community, right? Social media is so important to them. So really, let's really try to navigate all of the options. Like, do you have to delete your every piece of social media that you have? I think sometimes, yeah, that's the safest thing. But sometimes what that feels like is so unfair to them. It's like an unfair experience that they have to have. Now they're losing connection with their community. Now they don't get to, one of their pastimes and how they ground is watching some, reels or TikToks or whatever the case is. And now they have to lose that because of someone else's violence. Like, it feels unfair. And so we think about other options. Like we have had a young person create a secondary account, right? Where they feel like they can keep their main account that they maybe will use, sparingly, where they won't post too much, but they stay connected in ways that they want to stay connected. And then they have one that they can use freely. There's just ways to really think about. Oh, perfect. Thank you, Dominique, for sharing that about removing information from Google. Very helpful. Thank you so much. And block numbers, definitely. There's a setting on the phones where you can block unknown numbers from coming in. So numbers that are not saved, but also when they try to come in as unknown, reminding them of those options. Prevent spooking, so spoofing, sorry, not picking up or responding to unknown numbers. But again, there's often settings on our phones to block them from coming in at all. Think about these friend requests. Folks are making fake pages all the time. And so, do you know this person? Do you have mutual contact with this person? Does it feel, does their page look like it's established? Have they been using social media for a while and this is actually a real person? So really having them explore. Young people are good at all of these things, but just good reminders for them. Code words for communication, that's important. Not giving out Wi-Fi information or joining random networks. Talking to third parties about posting photos. Again, this ties a little bit to things that we've already said. We can do Google alerts for your name and photo. Request removal of personal information, which thank you, Dominique, again, for sharing that information, because that's going to be helpful to everyone. Again, about using incognito browsers if necessary, so there's no way for people to track what their history is, what their search history is. And then for young parents that you might be serving, or even for the parents and caregivers that you're interacting with, having them think about some of these things for the devices that their children are using. Okay, next slide. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is actually a tool that was created by our partners at Cornell Tech, the Clinic to End Tech Abuse. I wanted to have this here because I know that sometimes having very concrete resources or things to think about can be helpful. We've also linked their technology assessment questionnaire. What I will say is that Cornell Tech works specifically with folks 18 and over. So if you're working with younger people, you can think about the ways that this can apply, or the ways we can adapt it for a younger population based on their routines, their communities, their access, and so on. And just I should have made a note of this, but AP, the language that Cornell Tech uses, AP means abusive partner. And so I think that might be it for me as it relates to safety planning. Happy to answer questions if folks have any right now, or I can move us on. All right, I think we're good. Oh,
We do
no one
have a
else.
little more here about responding to survivors. So we covered it a bit
We
last
covered a
week,
ton of
but
this, exactly. And so again, to that support piece too, we are supporting them. We're leading them through steps of, using our own knowledge, but also leaning on the expertise that we know that they do have as well about their circumstances. They are essentially best positioned to identify what some of the risks are, what safety means to them, and some of the ways that they can realize just safety for themselves. Thank you.
so I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the back end of some of these issues, and how our legal team responds to issues once they've arisen. And I think just to segue into that, I want to talk a little bit about the regulations and laws that allow us to work with young people, because as Natalie mentioned, we may have a relationship with a young person's parent or caregiver, or we may not. And that's really up to that client that we work with. On the legal side, the law is very, very clear in New York that we can have an attorney-client relationship with our clients, and that there's no reason why a parent needs to be involved. There's no real legal basis why anyone else needs to be involved in our relationship with our client. And then I will say, I know this is kind of a burning and complicated question on the social services side. We do work with young people on our social services team without the consent of their parents. That is in part based on how we are authorized to practice very, very specifically at day one. So it's not necessarily something that every agency can do. And so I do want to have that full disclosure. That is really based on research that we did about our specific authorization to practice. And it may also be related to your specific licensure and what type of practitioners you have in your office. For us, we are authorized to work with young people without their parents' consent, but it is true that in many, many, many contexts, that would not be the case, especially if you're working through an agency, a state or city agency. So for us in our office setting, we do work both on the legal side and on the social services side directly with young people. And obviously, if there are more questions, the age requirement for parental consent in New York State, that is a very complicated question, because it's really different depending on what you're asking about. For instance, in the legal context, we work with folks who may be dealing with issues of image-based sexual abuse, for instance, and we may be wanting to file to seek an order of protection in family court based on some unlawful dissemination or publication of an intimate image. There's no age that any parent has to be informed, involved in any way. There's no issue of parental consent in order to work with us or to go to family court and file a case. And that's the law, but there are a lot of people who are involved in exercising the laws, enforcing the laws, and people may have different interpretations. So a lot of the advocacy that we do end up doing may end up being around the rights of young people to speak for themselves and contract for themselves with an attorney, work with an attorney, and file petitions. In our case, it's usually in family court. So again, if there are more questions, I know that's a really big topic that could be a whole separate training. I'll keep looking, but I'm going to talk a little bit about image-based sexual abuse, which I think people are generally speaking pretty familiar with what that looks like. Something like revenge porn. It's very common. It's very, very harmful. And there are actually in New York State remedies for image-based sexual abuse that didn't used to exist. I wouldn't say that they're perfect, and I think there's a lot of education that needs to go into informing the sort of judicial system and the legal system about what that looks like. But as of today, that is, it's a crime to unlawfully disseminate or publicate an intimate image without someone's consent. And it's also a cause of action that would allow you to ask for an order of protection in family court if you filed a family offense petition in New York. So let's move forward. And this is not so much, I'm going to talk about things that are not so much legal remedies, but things that we think about on the legal side if we're going to try and help someone move forward with some sort of legal remedy or legal intervention if they've experienced some sort of cyber or tech based abuse. It's really important to talk to young people about communicating that they wish to stop communication with that person if there's ongoing communication that may be looking more like stalking. Encouraging young people to talk to other people around them, like we've talked about, avoiding responding to messages. And also on the legal side, it is actually really important to start to think about preserving things like texts and emails and harassing communication, because the one other avenue for relief, if you have experienced these issues, would be to try to convince a judge that there's been harassment through some sort of cyber channel. And that is a really new area of law in New York, in everywhere. And I think that that's an area where we have a lot of work to do with judges, with other people in the legal system, in understanding that harassment can come from someone, even perhaps someone you've never met in person. It could be someone that you have only had a relationship with online. And that's really a new area of law that I think we're going to be exploring for a long time to come. And then I will say there are really wonderful resources that are available to work on things like getting your images off of the internet, preventing your images from going onto the internet. Some of them are on a couple of slides down. There are some really good resources. And it is possible to request from, an internet service provider or from a specific site to have your image removed. And there are really good organizations doing that work. So you'll see in a couple of slides that there are some resources available, even though it feels like a very uphill battle. So let's move forward. These are just a couple of other tips for prevention. And it seems, some of them seem a little silly, but sometimes we just need a reminder that we need to talk through all of these things with the folks that we're working with, because it takes work to start to recognize that there may have been, a breach of someone's boundaries. And so sometimes we just have to ask really explicit questions about whether or not they have changed their privacy settings on their social media, whether or not they're using a VPN if they feel that it's necessary, and using a strong and new password. I also will just say that I have experienced a lot recently that young people that I'm working with are educating the adults around them, because sometimes folks are much savvier than we think they are, and really, really savvy about what they're experiencing, and maybe very, very self-aware about what they're experiencing. But there may be other people around them that are less tech savvy, who don't have privacy settings. A parent who may be using, a platform that they're working with as a business, and they may have a lot of identifying information, and they may be living with that parent. So I will just put a plug out there for, again, talking to young people about the adults in their lives, and working on educating the adults, young people educating the adults in their lives about how they can also help protect their safety through their own privacy settings as a caregiver. So let's move forward. And just to return back to image-based sexual abuse, it is, I think, one of the most common, or maybe the most identifiable types of sort of cyber abuse that we're seeing right now. So I do try and talk to folks who have experienced other types of abuse about, whether or not they're at risk for some type of image-based sexual abuse, or some type of dissemination or publication of intimate images. And if you're working in a more of a preventive capacity, of course, talking to young people about boundaries, not sending sexually explicit images, storing your images with passwords, making sure that your face is not in images. And I could not plug enough the CCRI Image Abuse Helpline, which is here, who are really incredible sources of information and assistance when these issues arise. So I think with that, we're gonna close it out. And there's one more slide that has a lot of resources on it that I think will be really helpful. I think we'll open it up for a few questions for any of us, and definitely for legal questions if there are any.
Hi, there aren't any pending questions in the Q&A. Our facilitators have answered those. If people want to add their questions to their chat, please do. If you raise your hand, we'll be able to unmute you and you can speak your question and we can answer it that way.
While we're waiting for some of those to come through, I just want to say a very hearty thank you on behalf of everybody here. What a session. This was absolutely wonderful. I do want to let everyone know that we will be sending an email out probably tomorrow with the evaluation survey. If you don't do it now, I've just put it in the chat as well. We'll also have links to these slides and the slides from the first session, as well as the link to the YouTube the YouTube recordings. So you will get all of this material right to your emails if you are marked as having attended. I want to thank our director, B. Hansen, for making this a priority, and also our partners at the CUNY Institute of State and Local Governance for making this happen. And of course, our folks from day one. Please complete the evaluation. It's super quick. And also visit our TARP webpage at ovs.ny.gov/TARP. Take advantage of the free trainings that can be offered to your team. It's really invaluable service. I guess we can leave the room open for just a couple more minutes, just in case anything pops through. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I just saw a note come through. Yes, TARP is free. So free, my favorite price for anything. And really, I know sometimes it can feel like the submission form can be, you need a lot of information. If you put just enough, you'll be connected to me as team. They start that conversation. You don't have to know everything. You just need to know that you need something. And Mia and her team from ISLG will help connect those dots and work to build something that works for you. We've had folks submit things, and then what actually ends up getting put into place maybe looks totally different, but her team is really responsive and wonderful in getting that done. So completely free, and thank you.
Thank you for that, Rachel. And adding to what you said, there's a question in the chat that's very relevant. James asked, are you willing to put on this training for other organizations like legal aid agency or bar associations? And our answer is that we're happy to provide a training like this to a individual victim assistance provider that's funded by OVS. And the way to do it is to submit that request form, letting us know that you would like a similar training to this webinar. And who you are, and then we'll be able to reach you and connect you maybe to someone like Day One, maybe Day One themselves. We have to see their availability and get that information to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Yes, I'm going to put my email in the chat. You might have been referring to the Day One team too. I'm sure they could put their emails in the chat or reshare that slide that had your contact information.
And we will share those slides in the follow-up
Mhm.
email as well.
And if you have any questions about requesting those trainings, just email me, and we can get on a quick call, or I can send you the information via email. Any more questions for Day One while we have them?
It's a question to go back to the previous slide.
Mhm.
I think the resource slide.
Yeah.
And I'll just pop the link to these slides, a PDF of these slides in the chat as well, for those of you still on. And they will be shared in the follow-up email. But the best way for us to be able to continue to provide events like this is for you to complete that evaluation and tell us just how much you loved it. We're also always open to constructive feedback as well, but we really do use all of those evaluations. We'll be also putting together a training needs assessment in the coming months. So this is really a great way for your voice to be heard. We do share that. Mia's team will share that with OVS for our learning, but they'll also share it with Day One for theirs as well. So please, it only takes about 2 minutes. I promise it's not a really, really heavy one.
And since there's no more questions for the facilitators, I think we can close. Thank you all for joining. We'll be in touch via email. And thank you again, Natalie, Nora, Z. It was so great having you for this 2-part series.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks.